He left me in the hallway without even walking me in, just dropped my bag by the front desk, muttered something to the receptionist, and turned back toward the parking lot without looking over his shoulder. The woman behind the counter barely glanced up. "Name?" she asked. "Martha West," I said, though my voice came out thinner than I'd meant. She scribbled something, pointed to a nurse, and that was it. No welcome, no tour, no questions. Just like that, I was someone to be shelved. I hadn't cried in front of Graham since the day his father died. I didn't cry now either, not even when I saw the room. A narrow cell with peeling paint and a rust-stained sink. The window overlooked the back of a dumpster. One twin-sized bed, one worn chair, a dresser missing a handle. I'd taught literature to teenagers for 42 years. I'd traveled to Dublin for my retirement. And now I was supposed to live here. In this. The nurse, a broad woman with tired eyes, pointed at the plastic bracelet on my wrist. "That's your ID," she said. "Don't take it off." I nodded, sat down on the bed that creaked under my weight, and waited. For what? I didn't know. Maybe to feel real again. Dinner was served at 5 sharp. A tray was pushed into my hands, mashed potatoes the texture of glue, gray peas, and something that looked like chicken, but tasted of metal. No one at my table spoke. One woman just stared at her tray. Another drooled quietly onto her blouse. I felt a scream somewhere deep inside me, trying to claw its way up, but I pressed it down. I chewed, swallowed, smiled faintly when the aide passed by. Afterward, I asked if I could call my son. The receptionist handed me a phone like she was offering me a paper towel. "Graham," I said when he answered. "I'm settled in." "That's good," he said quickly. "It's temporary, remember? Just until you adjust. It's better than you living alone, Mom." I wanted to say something, to ask why the place smelled of bleach and old wounds, why the floors were sticky, why my chest already felt like it was closing. But I heard someone in the background, probably his wife, and his voice lowered. "Don't make a fuss, okay? We're doing what's best. Don't waste money on upgrades. It's fine." He hung up before I could answer. That night, I lay on the plastic-covered mattress in a too-thin gown and stared at the crack in the ceiling. I remembered our kitchen back in Springfield. The way Graham used to sit at the table with milk mustached across his upper lip, reading Calvin and Hobbes while I packed his lunch. I wondered what happened to that boy, and what exactly I'd become in his eyes. A burden, an expense, a body to store. I woke around midnight to a loud groan down the hallway, then a thud. Someone called out faintly. Feet shuffled past my door. No one stopped. No alarm. No voice calling back. Just silence. And then more silence. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear. The next morning, there was a new woman at breakfast. Quiet, frail, still. The staff didn't mention the absence. I didn't ask. By the third day, I knew the routine. Wake, pills, breakfast, sit, lunch, pills, sit, dinner, sleep. The nurses were overworked. The aides were indifferent. And the director? A slick man in his 50s who shook hands like he wanted to be somewhere else. On day 5, I found a notebook in the activities room, left behind by someone long gone. I opened to a blank page, took out the pen I always kept in my purse, and began to write. Not poems, not journal entries, notes, observations, dates, names, smells, sounds, times. If this was where they meant to keep me quiet, they'd made a mistake. I wasn't done speaking yet. The first thing they take from you isn't your freedom, it's your pace. You no longer decide when you wake, when you eat, when you go outside, if you go outside at all. The hallway lights flick on at 6 a.m. Sharp, and a nurse you don't know calls you sweetheart while rattling your pills into a plastic cup. No good morning, no explanation. Just take this. So you do. The dining room is gray in the morning. The windows let in light, but nothing feels warm. I sat at table 3, where the seats weren't assigned, but never changed. Dolores sat across from me, a woman in her 80s who wore the same wool cardigan every day and only spoke to mutter, "too cold." Next to her, Mr. Klein, silent, except when asked if he wanted toast. And beside me, Hazel, who shuffled with a walker and smelled like lilacs and mildew. The food didn't taste like anything. Scrambled eggs the color of dishwater. Toast like cardboard. Coffee poured from the same pot used for days, bitter and burnt. I used to brew French roast every morning, grind the beans myself. Now I sipped this sludge and smiled when the aides passed by. Perform. That's what we did here. Smile. Sit still. Take your pills. One morning, I asked the nurse, Susan, I think, though they never introduced themselves, if I could get some fresh air. "There's a courtyard," she said, barely looking up. "It's locked unless someone's free to take you." "When will that be?" She shrugged. "Depends." I didn't ask again. Instead, I walked the halls, back and forth, past room 101, where the TV was always blaring, past 106, where a man cried out in his sleep, past 110, where the door was always closed and the aides lowered their voices. The whole place smelled like old furniture and disinfectant. There were stains on the carpet, the wallpaper peeled at the corners. Once I saw a cockroach in the vending area. I mentioned it to the receptionist. She rolled her eyes. By the second week, I had filled 5 pages in the notebook. Names of the nurses, times they distributed meds, days when patients cried out and were ignored. I wrote it all. My handwriting was smaller now, arthritis in my fingers, but precise. Hazel noticed me writing one afternoon. "What's that?" she asked. "Just notes," I said. She nodded, then leaned closer. "You're smart to keep track." That same day, a woman named June was wheeled into our dining room. She had sharp cheekbones and thinning white hair. Her hands trembled, and she didn't speak. The aides whispered that she'd come from another facility that shut down. I watched how they handled her. Rough, rushed, like luggage. I started writing her name, too. That night, someone knocked on my door. "You need to keep your door closed," said a young aide with a ponytail. "Management policy." "Why?" "It's just safer." "For who?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "Just follow the rules, ma'am." I nodded and shut the door. Then I wrote that down, too. In the weeks that followed, the small things added up. A man with bruises on his arm that weren't there the day before. A woman given someone else's meds. Shouting behind the staff break room. Residents left in the hallway unattended for hours. One afternoon, I saw an aide yell at Hazel for spilling water. Hazel flinched so hard her walker tipped. I helped her up. The aide just walked away. That night, Hazel knocked on my door and handed me a folded paper. "What's this?" "List of who's been hurt," she whispered. "Startin' with Ruthie last spring." Inside were 5 names, dates, incidents. Some I remembered hearing about, others I hadn't. I looked up at Hazel. "You kept track too?" "Didn't know what to do with it. But maybe you do." I opened my notebook, gently inserted her list between the pages, and nodded. Something inside me had started to rise. Not rage, resolve. The first open confrontation came on a Tuesday morning after breakfast, when a nurse dropped my pills into my hand without a word. I'd noticed the dosage looked different. fewer tablets. One of them a color I'd never seen before. "What is this?" I asked. "It's your regular meds," she said curtly, already turning to the next person. "No," I replied, holding the unfamiliar pill between my fingers. "I take lisinopril, metformin, and a baby aspirin. This," I pointed, "isn't mine." She sighed, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "They come pre-packed by the pharmacy. Just take it." "I won't," I said quietly. She glared. "Then you can wait until the supervisor checks it. Might take a few hours." "That's fine." I didn't swallow it. I sat there with the small plastic cup in my lap until she finally walked away. After she left, Dolores whispered, "Last week they gave me blood pressure meds twice. My head spun for a day." Hazel leaned closer. "They change the nurse every month. No one knows who takes what. It's roulette." I added a new page in my notebook. Medication errors, cross-checks absent, residents receiving incorrect doses. That evening, I approached the front desk and asked to speak with the director. "He's in meetings," the receptionist said. "Every day?" "He's very busy." So I wrote that down too. The more I recorded, the more others began to notice. Quiet nods in the hallway. Someone slipping me a note folded inside a napkin. People who hadn't spoken in weeks started murmuring little things. Wrong meds, bruises, being yelled at, ignored. It wasn't just the building that was cracked. It was the system holding us all hostage. 3 weeks in, I started keeping 2 notebooks, one with fake poetry and scribbles I'd show if anyone asked. The real one stayed under my mattress, wrapped in an old tea towel I'd kept from home. I called it my ledger of indignities. Page by page, I documented it all. Broken walkers never repaired, residents bathed once a week, if that, bed sores ignored, meals served cold, families lied to. I still remembered the day Graham dropped me off, how he said it was just for a few weeks. I hadn't heard from him since. I left a message once just to see. "Graham, it's Mom. I'm here. Just wondering how you are." No callback. Maybe he thought out of sight meant out of mind. Maybe he thought I'd fade quietly, like wallpaper in a house no one lived in anymore. But I didn't fade. I paid attention. I stayed sharp. And one night, everything changed. June, the quiet woman in the wheelchair, began gasping after dinner. Her breathing turned rapid, chest rattling like a broken metronome. We shouted for help. No one came. For 6 minutes, no one came. When they finally did, an aide scolded her for faking again. I stood up from my chair and snapped, "She's not faking. She's in distress. Call a nurse." The aide's eyes narrowed. "You need to calm down, Mrs. West." "I will not calm down. You call someone now, or I'll call 911 myself." That got them moving. A nurse came, checked vitals, and finally wheeled June away. She was back the next day, but quieter, frailer. I wrote the whole event down in full detail. Time, staff names, response delay. Then I copied it onto another sheet and folded it carefully. I was done waiting. It was time to find someone who could listen. Someone outside. But I didn't know who. Not yet. The first person who helped me without knowing it was a volunteer named Clara. She came in twice a week to read to the residents, mostly the ones who couldn't hold books anymore. Clara was in her 20s, always cheerful, with chipped blue nail polish and a canvas tote bag full of paperbacks. One afternoon, I asked her if she had any poetry. "I might," she said, digging into her bag. "What you like? Frost? Dickinson?" "Bishop," I replied, "if you have it." She smiled. "Good taste." We sat in the activity room where the TV blared reruns no one watched. Clara read aloud while I pretended to listen. In reality, I was watching the hallway. One of the nurses wheeled a man into the wrong room and left him there. Another aide dumped a tray of food onto a table and walked off without helping a woman sit up. Clara paused. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking." When she finished reading, she helped gather the books and offered to walk me back to my room. On the way, I asked her, "Are volunteers allowed to use their phones here?" She looked surprised. "Yeah, why?" "No reason," I said. "Just wondering." That night, I asked Hazel if she had any family who visited. She shook her head. "Used to? Not anymore." "Anyone who might believe you if you told them what's going on here?" Hazel looked up slowly. "Maybe my niece, Janine. But she's busy. Has a big job in Atlanta." "I have a granddaughter," I said. "Lily, college student, art major. Haven't heard from her in months." "You think she'd help?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But it might be time to find out." The next day, I asked the front desk to help me send a letter. "We don't offer postal services," the receptionist said flatly. "I'll address it and stamp it myself." She sighed, handed me a form. "Fill this out. We send mail once a week." I wrote Lily's name and address in my neatest cursive. I folded the note around one of my most detailed entries. The night June almost stopped breathing. I wrote only one sentence to Lily. "If you want to know what's happening to me, read this carefully. Don't tell your father." 3 days later, she showed up. I was in the common room, pretending to do a crossword, when I saw her through the glass doors. Bright red scarf, oversized tote, paint-stained jeans. She hadn't changed since last summer, when she'd visited me in Springfield and asked about my old record player. "Grandma," she said softly, stepping inside. I stood slowly. "Lily." She hugged me, tighter than I expected. "Is it true?" she whispered. "Everything you wrote?" I nodded. She sat across from me, her eyes wide, her voice low. "I Googled this place. There's barely any info. No reviews, no photos." "There's nothing online because no one makes it out with energy to post," I said. "But I've kept records. Names, dates, incidents. I have it all." "Can I see?" I hesitated, then handed her the notebook, still wrapped in the tea towel. She flipped through, page after page, her expression darkening. "Grandma, this is huge. Some of this is illegal." "I know." Lily looked up. "I have a friend whose aunt is a legal intern. She works at a law firm that handles elder abuse cases." My breath caught. "I'll ask her what to do next," she said. "We won't be quiet about this." I felt my hands tremble. Not from fear, something else. For the first time in months, I felt a breeze of air crack the suffocating stillness. A door was opening. It happened on a Thursday night. I was already in bed, reading one of the paperbacks Clara had left. Something about a woman who reinvents her life at 70, when I heard it. A groan. Low, guttural. Then a sharp cry. I sat up, heart pounding. The hallway was dark except for the weak glow from the nightlight near the medicine cart. Then another sound, more urgent now. A name, maybe. June's voice. Strained. Panicked. I threw on my robe, opened the door quietly, and stepped into the hall. June's room was 2 doors down. Her light was on. Her voice trembled behind the door. "Help. Please." I knocked once. "June?" No answer, just ragged breathing. I turned the knob, unlocked. She was half out of bed, her body twisted at an angle, her wheelchair pushed too far away. Her skin was pale, lips blue at the corners. I ran as best I could, down the corridor to the nurse's station. Empty. No one. back to the reception area. Dark. I pressed the call bell. No response. For 13 minutes, I timed it. No one came. I counted every second in my head. When I finally saw an aide coming down the hallway, I flagged her down. "Room 114, I said. "It's June. She's in trouble." She sighed. Sighed. She always exaggerates. I stepped in front of her. "Get someone now." She rolled her eyes, but finally turned around. They took their time. When the nurse arrived, different one tonight, a man with a tired face and cracked glasses, he muttered something about low blood sugar and gave her juice. June lay there, barely responding. They didn't call a doctor, didn't call 911. I stayed with her after they left, holding her hand, watching her chest rise in shallow waves. She didn't speak. Next morning, her bed was empty. Her name erased from the whiteboard on her door. No explanation. I asked the front desk, "Where's June?" "She was transferred," they said. "Where?" "Privacy policy. Can't disclose." Hazel sat next to me in the dining room, eyes narrowed. "Transferred?" That's what they said when they took Ruthie out in a stretcher. I wrote it all down. Every detail. That evening, Lily called from her campus apartment. "We're in," she said. "My friend's aunt wants to meet you. She works at Brenner, Colfax, and Maynard. They've handled 3 elder abuse suits. Big ones." I nodded, phone pressed to my cheek. "She's coming next weekend. I told her everything. She wants to see the notes. And maybe talk to other residents." I looked at the hallway, where the aides laughed too loud near the medicine room. "It has to be quiet," I said. "No one can know? Not yet." "Understood. We'll be careful." I hung up and placed the phone back in my drawer. Then I pulled out the notebook and opened to a fresh page. June. Room 114. Respiratory distress. No emergency response. Removed within 12 hours. Status. Unknown. There would be no more silence. Not anymore. I waited a full week before calling Graham again. It had been 2 months since he left me here. Not a single visit. Not even a postcard. The last time I heard his voice was when he said, "Don't make a fuss, you'll be fine." But I wasn't fine. So I called. The phone rang 5 times before he picked up. "Mom?" His voice was cautious, like he'd answered out of guilt. "Hello, Graham," I said. "I wanted to check in." "Is something wrong?" "I suppose that depends on your definition," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "Tell me, when you placed me here, did you know what this place was like?" A pause. Then, "It's a care facility. The agency said it was reputable." "Did you read any reviews? Did you visit first?" He exhaled sharply. "Mom, I had a lot going on. We just moved. Sophie's in therapy. I trusted the referral. You trusted it more than me." Another pause. "Look, it's not permanent. We'll revisit the arrangement when things settle down." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, voice tightening, "you're safe, you're housed, and we're doing our best." I felt the words burning on my tongue, but I swallowed them. "Do you want to know what happened last night?" I asked instead. "Do you want to hear about June?" "Who?" "She's gone. Wheeled out in the middle of the night after staff ignored her for almost 15 minutes while she was gasping for air." He was silent. "Would you like to see where I sleep, Graham? Would you like to smell the hallway where someone vomited 3 days ago and no one's cleaned it yet?" "Mom," he started. "Or maybe you'd prefer to know about the bruises, the medication errors, the verbal abuse. That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a record. I've been documenting everything, names, dates, incidents, and I'm not the only one. Now his voice turned defensive. You're overreacting. You've always had a dramatic streak. I nearly laughed. Yes, Graham, I'm the dramatic one. Not the son who left his mother in a for-profit warehouse for the elderly and called it compassion. You don't understand the pressures we're under. And you don't understand what it feels like to be discarded. He didn't respond. I didn't call to argue, I said finally. I called because you're still my son. And I wanted to give you the chance to ask me if I'm okay. Long silence. Then, are you okay? No, I said, but I will be. I hung up before he could reply. That night, I added a new entry. Graham West. Call log, no accountability, denial, disinterest, distance. Hazel knocked a few minutes later. You okay? I'm tired, I said. She looked down at the notebook in my lap. Still writing? Every day. Hazel sat beside me. You think they'll listen? I looked her in the eye. If they don't listen to us, they'll listen to a judge. The notebook had become more than a record. It was a weapon. I kept it wrapped in that old tea towel, hidden under the cushion of my reading chair. Not because I feared losing it. I feared them finding it. In here, documentation was dangerous. Silence was expected. Memory was supposed to fade. They didn't expect a 72-year-old woman to track malpractice like a prosecutor. But I remembered everything. Every shift change, every tray of cold food, every ignored call bell. I logged it all. Hazel sometimes whispered things in my ear at lunch, times, names, offhand comments, and I wrote them down that night when the halls were quiet. There was a moment, midweek, when I almost lost heart. The aide who usually ignored me offered to brush my hair. I said yes, hoping it meant change. But halfway through, she got a call on her cell and left me sitting there with a comb still tangled in the back of my scalp. An hour passed before anyone came back. That night, my scalp still sore, I added to the notebook. A small act of kindness in this place is just unfinished theater. 2 days later, Lily returned. This time, she brought someone with her. They arrived during visitor hours, so no one raised an eyebrow. I saw them through the lobby glass, Lily in a long beige coat, beside a tall woman in her 40s with dark red lipstick and sharp posture. Grandma? Lily smiled as she walked over. This is Callie Moran. Callie extended her hand. Firm grip, steady eyes. I'm with Brenner, Colfax and Maynard, she said. Lily showed me your notes. With your permission, I'd like to talk to you. Off the record for now. We sat in my room, door closed. Hazel stood watch outside, pretending to knit. Callie didn't waste time. I've seen dozens of neglect cases, she said. But the level of documentation you've kept? Martha, this is extraordinary. You've recorded evidence most clients wouldn't even think to notice. I nodded, but said nothing. She opened her folder. We've started a preliminary file. There are already 3 other complaints about this facility in the last 18 months, slipped under the rug. We're contacting those families. She looked up at me. Are you ready to be the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit? I blinked. Not from fear, from the sudden realization that someone believed me. I am, I said. I need copies of your notebook, Callie said. We'll get them scanned, and if you're willing, we'll discreetly interview some of the other residents. I'll help, I said. So will Hazel, and maybe Dolores. Perfect. They left with the first 3 notebooks tucked into Lily's tote. That night, I felt something shift in me. For months, I had recorded pain, humiliation, loss. Now, for the first time, I was recording purpose. They'd left me here to be quiet. but quiet is not the same as powerless. The air changed when the lawsuit began to take form, not in the staff, not yet, but among us, the residents. Hazel started walking straighter. Dolores, who hadn't spoken in weeks beyond too cold, began making eye contact again. I saw Mr. Klein one morning tearing a used napkin in half, like he had too much energy for silence. We weren't free yet, but something was rising, like warmth returning to limbs long frozen. It was Clara, the volunteer, who unwittingly gave us the next opportunity. She came in on a Monday with her usual tote bag and a stack of magazines, but tucked between 2 issues of Reader's Digest was a digital recorder. Lily must have slipped it in. Clara smiled as she handed it to me discreetly. Just in case you want to record, I don't know, a poem or something. I knew what she meant. I nodded. Maybe I will. The next day, during breakfast, I clicked it on. Not openly, just quietly. Placed it beneath my napkin as the staff moved around, voices clipped and impatient. "Why is this toast always burned?" Dolores muttered. The aide didn't respond. Just plunked another tray on the table and walked off. Hazel leaned toward me. "That's Yolanda. She was written up last year for slapping a resident, but she's still here." I made a mental note of the name, the voice, the tone. Captured in real time now, not just ink. That evening, I met Lily by the outer fence. She stood on the sidewalk just beyond the courtyard wall. I passed her the recorder under the guise of returning a paperback through the slats. She gave me a look. Pride, worry, something like both. And mouthed, "We've got it." 2 days later, Callie returned. She met with me, Hazel, and, quietly, Dolores, who nodded through most of the conversation but confirmed everything I'd written about her medication mix-ups. Callie had brought more folders, legal documents, affidavits. "You're building a case," I said. "We are," she replied, "and we're not alone anymore." Turns out another resident's daughter from 3 years back had filed a complaint about bed sores and untreated infections. Nothing came of it then. No one backed her up. But now, with our notes, our voices, our timeline, it was no longer one woman's word against a wall. That night, Hazel stayed in my room for a while. "I used to be a nurse, you know," she said quietly, "back before arthritis got to my hands. I know how things are supposed to be done. And this place? It's a disgrace." "You ever think we'd end up doing this?" I asked. She gave a half smile. "No, but it's about time someone did." I looked at the folder Callie had left behind. Lead plaintiff, class action, gross negligence. I never expected those words to follow my name, not in this life. But sometimes life hands you back your voice when you least expect it, and when it does, you don't whisper. You speak. Lily came again on a Friday, just after lunch, when the halls were quiet and most of the residents were napping in front of the blaring TV. She was dressed in black jeans and a navy sweater, hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the last month, but her eyes, sharp and steady, were more focused than I'd ever seen them. "I brought you something," she whispered, handing me a large manila envelope. Inside were copies of my notebooks, now printed, organized, and labeled. "Callie says we're filing the suit next week." I held the envelope in both hands. It had weight, substance. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was evidence. My life, translated into something that couldn't be ignored. "There's more," Lily added. "We found internal reports, state inspections that got buried. One cited minor sanitation concerns and inconsistent staffing patterns. But they never followed up. I nodded slowly. How much can we use? All of it, she said. And residents are coming forward, not just here. Other facilities owned by the same parent company. That surprised me. They own more? 7, she said, across the state, most under different names. But the business filings connect them. Of course. Keep it fragmented, untraceable, not anymore. I'm going to ask them, I said, every single one here if they want to speak. Lily looked wary. That's risky. If management finds out, they won't. I'll do it during meals. Quietly. No pressure. And I did. Over the next 3 days, I moved table to table, chair to chair. Not everyone was willing. Some were too frightened, some too confused. But a few listened. Dolores, Mr. Klein, a tall, thin man named Harold, who'd once been a professor of philosophy and still quoted Aristotle under his breath. I don't want revenge, Harold told me. I just want dignity. We all do. Lily compiled the statements into a growing file. She scanned every signature, time-stamped each quote. Callie called that evening. We're going public next month. After we file, the story breaks. A reporter from the Wilmington Chronicle wants to interview you. I'm not doing it for attention, I said. I know, Callie replied. But if you don't speak, someone else will, and it won't be from inside. I agreed to the interview. We met in the courtyard, the same place where I'd once been told no one was free to take me outside. Now Lily had arranged it. The staff looked the other way, probably instructed not to interfere. It was already too late for them. The journalist was younger than I expected, a man named Terrence who reminded me of a former student. Polite, quiet, carried a notepad he barely looked at. Why did you start writing everything down? He asked. Because everyone else had stopped looking, I said. Even my own son. Terrence paused. Do you want me to include that? You can, I said. But this isn't about him, not really. It's about all of us. I told him about June, about Hazel's list, about nights with no nurses, meals with no heat, pills given without explanation. He listened for over an hour. When he left, he shook my hand and said, You've got more steel in you than anyone I've met this year. I just smiled. I didn't feel like steel. I felt like something even harder. Truth. On paper. With names. Let them come. Mary died 3 days before the article came out. They found her slumped in her chair after breakfast, head tilted back, eyes wide open, tray still on her lap. No struggle. No sound. Just silence. The kind of silence that tells you something stopped that should never have been left alone. She'd been complaining of chest pain for a week, told the nurse twice, told an aide once. Each time they said they'd make a note. I checked. No notes, no chart updates, nothing. Hazel was the one who found her. I was across the room when I heard the scream. We weren't allowed to linger near the body. Staff closed off the dining hall and told us to return to our rooms. Respect the process, they said. I almost laughed. Mary had been kind. Sharp-tongued, yes, but kind. She once slipped me a butterscotch candy and said, Don't let them crush you. They're counting on your exhaustion. After they wheeled her out, I sat in my room for over an hour, too angry to speak, too sad to cry. Then I wrote. Mary Hill, room 117, complained of chest pain on 3 occasions. No record of response. Time of death, approximately 9:20 a.m., dining hall. Tray still full. Lily came the next day with a printed copy of the article. Front page, full column. My name in bold. Resident inside, a 72-year-old's fight to expose elder neglect. The piece quoted me, Hazel, even Harold. There were photos of the building, a diagram of the ownership structure, and a sidebar detailing the violations across all 7 sister facilities. I held the paper in my lap, like a brick of weight and memory. "They're panicking," Lily said. The corporate office issued a statement. "They're reviewing policies and taking the matter seriously." "They didn't take Mary seriously," Callie called that evening. "We're getting more plaintiffs," she said. "Former staff, family members. It's spreading." I sat by the window while she talked. Outside, the sun was starting to lower behind the power lines, casting long shadows over the pavement. I wondered if Mary had seen that same light on her last morning. "Your testimony will be next month," Callie said. "You'll be our lead voice in the hearing. Is that okay?" "Yes," I said. "But I'm not testifying for revenge. I'm testifying for the ones who never got the chance." Hazel knocked a few minutes later, carrying a cup of tea. She looked tired, pale. "I keep thinking," she said, "we should have done more. For Mary." "We did what we could," I replied. "Now we do more for the rest." She nodded and left. I sat with the paper in my hands, the photo of me blurred just slightly, but my words printed clearly below it. They thought we would fade. They forgot some of us leave ink behind. The day of the hearing began like any other. I woke before dawn, dressed slowly, carefully, in the navy skirt I'd saved for something that once felt like hope. Hazel helped me pin my hair. She didn't speak much, but her hands were steady, her presence firm beside me. "I never testified in court before," I admitted. "You've already done the hard part," she said. "You survived long enough to be heard." Lily met us in the lobby. She looked sharper than usual. Pressed slacks, a structured blazer, no paint under her nails for once. She handed me a small envelope before we left. Inside was a photo, me and her on my porch in Springfield, one summer years ago. I was laughing, head tilted back, sun in my hair. She'd written in tiny script on the back, "You were never invisible. Not to me." At the courthouse, they took us through a back entrance. "Less spectacle," Callie said. She was already inside, flanked by legal aids and folders thicker than hymnals. Her face brightened when she saw me. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for years." The courtroom wasn't packed, but it didn't need to be. A few journalists, a few lawyers from the defense, young men in sleek suits who didn't meet my eyes. A representative from the parent company sat stiffly, jaw clenched. Not one staff member from the facility showed up. When I was called to the stand, I didn't shake. My voice didn't quiver. I told them about the hallway at night, the ignored cries, the roaches, the spoiled milk, the bruises on Dolores's wrist, the time Mr. Klein was left in his soiled clothes for hours. I told them about Mary. I read directly from my notebook. No exaggeration, no dramatics, just truth. When I finished, no one clapped, no one cried. But no one interrupted either. That silence, the kind that settles when something undeniable has been spoken, that was enough. Afterward, I sat beside Callie outside the courtroom. She was scrolling through her phone, reading the first headlines. "It's going to snowball," she said. "You just started something that can't be stopped." I looked out the window at the courthouse lawn. There was a small bird hopping across the sidewalk, one wing tucked awkwardly, still moving, still going. "I didn't want to start a fire," I said, "but I won't apologize if it burns the right things down." Callie smiled. "Well, it's burning." That night, back at the facility, Hazel was waiting. "How'd it go?" "I told them the truth," I said. "Good," she whispered. They needed to hear it. I sat on the edge of my bed, the courtroom air still clinging to my clothes. I opened my notebook to a new page. Told, Not buried, not silenced, told. And I kept the pen in my hand. Because the fight wasn't over. But we were winning. The judgment came on a Wednesday. It was Callie who called, voice crackling slightly through the line, but steady, like always. "We won," she said. $4.7 million in damages. Class action status upheld. Settlement includes mandatory federal investigation of the parent company's facilities. I sat in silence, gripping the receiver. "We won," she repeated, softer now. "How much goes to the residents?" I asked. "A significant portion. You'll receive the largest share as lead plaintiff." "And the rest?" "Divided. Survivors first, then families of the deceased. We'll make sure every single person connected to this place gets what's owed." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. $4.7 million. I remembered how they used to serve peas so mushy they fell apart when you touched them. How they charged residents extra for adult diapers. How they cut the nighttime nursing staff to one for a 48-bed wing. All while executives at the top made bonuses and sent out glossy brochures about compassionate care. Now they'd pay. But my first reaction wasn't joy. It was breath. Like something unclenched inside my ribs for the first time in years. I told Hazel first. She sat back in her chair and whispered, "Mary would have liked this." "She'd have liked it more if she were still here," I replied. We didn't speak after that. Just sat together, staring out the window at a gray sky that suddenly looked more like morning than dusk. 2 days later, I met with my accountant. The office smelled like new carpet and expensive coffee, the kind of place my son probably felt comfortable in. Graham hadn't called, not when the article ran, not when the hearing happened, not when the verdict made headlines in 3 cities. I wasn't surprised. I told the accountant what I wanted. He blinked. "You want to buy the facility?" "Yes." "But why? You've exposed it. Shut it down. You've won." I looked him in the eye. "Winning is justice, but buying it, that's restoration." He shook his head. "It's a financial sinkhole. You'd be responsible for repairs, licensing, inspections." "I've read the reports. I've spoken to architects and advocates. It can be done." He adjusted his glasses. "You're serious." "Completely." It took 4 months. 4 months of paperwork, negotiations, structural assessments. The parent company was eager to offload the property. Too much bad press, too many lawsuits pending elsewhere. I bought it under a new name. Hazel helped me pick it. The Rose House. Simple. Quiet. Something that sounded like care without pretense. When we reopened, it wasn't a nursing home. It was a residence. No locked courtyards, no hidden fees, no patients called sweetheart by people who never learned their names. We hired twice the staff, real nurses, real cooks, a part-time therapist. Clara came back to read twice a week, now on payroll. Lily painted a mural in the new gathering room, birds in flight, sky breaking open. The rooms were repainted in soft blues and greens. Each one had a real window, a bookshelf, art that wasn't mass-produced. One wall held photos of those who never made it through. Mary, June, Ruthie. Names below them, no captions, no euphemisms. Hazel moved into the corner suite. Dolores finally got the heated blanket she'd asked for months ago. And me? I didn't move out. I stayed. Not because I had to, but because it mattered that someone who remembered stayed close. People asked me why I didn't just take the money and walk away. I tell them this: because the only thing stronger than memory is witness. And I remember everything. We reopened quietly. No ribbon cutting, no press release, No local dignitaries shaking hands in front of cameras. Just a new sign, freshly painted doors, and a room full of old people who weren't scared anymore. We kept the bones of the place, walls, ceilings, floors, but everything else changed. The buzzers were gone. The intercoms were replaced with soft chimes. No one shouted names down hallways. No one treated bodies like burdens. I hired people who wanted to be there. Real people. Some older themselves, some young and patient. All of them kind. During the first week, I made it a point to walk the halls every evening. Not to inspect, to witness. Dolores waved from her recliner, wrapped in a thick new blanket, her slippers lined with wool. Hazel was teaching a weekly group on how to write memory pieces. Not journals, she'd say. Stories. Because what we lived matters. Harold read aloud from Aristotle again, now to an audience. And Clara, our Clara, taught two aides how to crochet. I didn't speak much during those walks, just smiled, nodded, sat, when asked. I kept a different notebook now, thinner, bound in soft leather. I still wrote every day, not to record failures. To remember victories, small ones, real ones. Mr. Klein laughed today, twice. Hazel asked for second dessert. Strawberry cake. A new resident, Ruth, said she finally felt like a person again. On the 12th day after reopening, I received a letter. From Graham. Handwritten. Postmarked from a city an hour away. Mom, I read about what you did. I don't have an excuse. I just have shame. I'm sorry I left you there. I didn't understand. I was scared of the responsibility. Scared of you aging. You always seem so strong. Now I see I mistook strength for invincibility. If you'll allow it, I'd like to visit. No expectations. I just want to see what you've built. Maybe understand who you are again. Love, Graham. I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it in my notebook, and wrote beneath it. Still deciding. Because forgiveness isn't always a door you open. Sometimes it's a window you crack, just to see if the air has changed. That evening, Lily came by. She stood in the kitchen, where the smell of real soup filled the space. She looked around and said, "You did this." "No," I replied. "We did. All of us who refused to be forgotten." She leaned against the counter, eyes glistening. "I want to bring my art students here, to paint. Listen, maybe learn something." I nodded. Let them come. We're not just stories. We're the ending no one expects. Later, in bed, I lay under a handmade quilt Hazel had sewn and listened to the quiet hum of life around me. Peace doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes as the sound of no one crying behind a door. On the first warm morning of spring, we planted a tree in the courtyard. It was Hazel's idea. Not a plaque, not a bench, a living thing, something that'll keep growing even when we don't. We chose a dogwood. Simple, sturdy, white blossoms in April. The maintenance man, Paul, a gentle giant with old tattoos and soft hands, helped dig the hole. Clara brought gloves and lemonade. Lily came with her camera but only took one picture. "Just enough," she said. "The rest I'll remember." Everyone came out to watch. Even Mr. Klein, bundled in his sweater, nodded solemnly as the soil was packed in around the roots. Dolores whispered something over the leaves, an old prayer, maybe. Harold quoted Cicero. Hazel just stood there, hand on her cane, eyes closed. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because the silence felt fuller than anything I could say. Afterward, we had cake, real cake, not institutional slabs, and music. Someone played an old Patsy Cline record, A few of us even danced, in small sways and steps, like memories moving through limbs that hadn't forgotten how. Later that afternoon, I sat alone in my office. A converted former supply room now painted pale yellow. It smelled like books and lavender. There was a knock. "Come in," I said. Graham stepped inside. He looked older, not in years, but in something behind his eyes. He held his hands too tightly, like he wasn't sure if he deserved to let them rest. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," he said. "I didn't," I replied. "Lily did." He nodded, looking down. "This place looks nothing like before." "No, it doesn't. I read the articles. I saw the footage from the hearing. You were remarkable." "I was truthful." He sat across from me. There was a silence. Not heavy, not sharp. Just space. "I failed you," he said, voice thin. "I failed you when it mattered." "Yes." He looked up, flinching only slightly. "I won't ask you to forgive me. I just wanted to see the place you built. I didn't build it for you. I know." He stood, unsure whether to stay or leave. "Graham," I said, before he turned, "what are you afraid of now?" He hesitated. "That you'll never speak to me again." I looked at him, my son, my stranger, the boy I'd once carried through thunderstorms. "I just did." He exhaled, a sound halfway between grief and gratitude. "Would it be all right," he asked, "if I visited again?" "Not for me." "For Lily. For them. The people here." "You may," I said. "But next time, bring a book, or soup, or silence. We value all three." He smiled. It didn't erase the years, but it softened their edges. After he left, I stepped out into the courtyard. The dogwood stood tall in the sun, white blossoms flickering in the wind. Mary would have liked it. So would June. So would I. And I did. The last entry I wrote in my old notebook was not a list of grievances. It was a recipe. Hazel's peach cobbler, scrawled from memory, adapted for 2 people, then 4, then 20. She laughed when she saw it. "Now you're writing the sweet stuff," she said. I kept the notebook on a shelf in my new room, not under the mattress anymore, not hidden. The door didn't need to be locked these days. The danger wasn't inside the walls now. It was outside, where people still thought silence was protection. It isn't. Silence is a rust that eats everything from the inside. But we spoke. And when we spoke, we didn't scream. We documented. We witnessed. We refused to disappear. That's what this place is now. Not a home. A living archive. A house built from memory and resistance. The Rose House has visitors now. Young people, university groups, social workers in training. They sit in folding chairs while Harold lectures about dignity, while Hazel shows them how to chart their stories, while Dolores reads aloud from her newly published essay. And sometimes they ask about me. They want to know how it felt, what I'd say to others in places like the one we used to live in. I tell them this: they will underestimate you. They will tell you you're confused, tired, dramatic. They will try to dismiss what you've lived as decay. But memory is not weakness. It's proof you were there. And no one gets to erase that. I still get letters from other residents around the country, some in facilities like the one we fought, some in their own homes, but just as alone. They ask what to do, where to start. The answer is always the same. Start with one page, one story, one truth written down. That's how we began. That's how anything worth saving begins. And to you, the one who's reading this now, maybe in your car after a visit, maybe late at night when no one sees you crying, maybe because you know someone who's too quiet lately, I want you to hear me clearly. Don't wait. Don't wait until it's too late to ask questions. Don't wait until your mother forgets your name or your neighbor stops answering the phone. Don't assume they're fine just because they don't complain. Go. Look. Listen. Ask. And if something feels wrong, write it down. Speak it. Stand beside them. Don't leave. Because we are not just old. We are not expired. We are not invisible. We are the living archive of everything this world forgets too easily, and we remember everything. If this story meant something to you, share it, speak it, pass it on. Let no one you love be left unheard.